Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, April 22nd. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, and Trent Rosecrans here. We're going to talk Reds. We're going to try and solve the mystery of Andrew Abbott. So we had to bring in the person we know who has seen as much Andrew Abbott as anybody on the planet. Trent, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm guessing his parents have seen him more.
I didn't have a chance to reach out to them. Like, part of it was
so the people whose numbers are saved in your phone that you knew would be busy and not doing anything. What other qualifiers are we? This is like, oh yeah, he's great against left-handers in day games in August, odd number of years. So yeah, I'm honored. Thanks a lot. Really,
we love you, Trent.
So glad you ran out of other people and you found me. Oh, great. Thank you.
No.
But man, you guys fancy. Like that little intro and everything, super fancy.
We're a daily.
They don't have
podcast.
this stuff on the round table.
Yeah,
they're just. Carrig doesn't want that to be any good, so like everybody, he just wants people to be like, "Oh, it's so much better when Carrig was there." So I think that's kind of what's going on.
I've heard that too.
I mean,
I'll dig into that.
That's the thing. Like, it's weird because I knew him forever, and now that he's like the boss, we get those little notes like, "Don't look Carrig in the eye." It's weird. You have to like talk to his assistant now that he's management.
Oh yeah.
Does he have a real person
everything
working with him, or is
Carrig's assistants?
Are you sure it's not an AI bot though?
No, I'm not sure.
All right. Well, let's dig into some Reds. Please help us understand Andrew Abbott. And the main confusing part is that he continues to beat ERA indicators, right? So if you look at the time that Andrew Abbott has been in the big leagues, he debuted in 2023. If you look at pitchers with 200 or more innings during that span, he's like middle of the pack in WAR, 67th out of 121, close to middle of the pack in K- BB, but he's tied for 40th in ERA with Zach Gallen, which blows my mind because when I'm thinking about pitchers and ranking them, Zach Gallen and Andrew Abbott are not even in the same tier. They're not even in neighboring tiers. 92nd in Sierra during that same span and 95th in Stuff Plus. That's the part that confounds us as stuffists, as people who want to make it all make sense. Please help us understand, how does Andrew Abbott keep getting away with this and outperforming his projections?
Is there a stuff minus? Like, he has decent stuff, but it is that difference. Like, is it as simple as knowing how to pitch? I know it's a cliche and it's like annoying because especially the people I'm talking to now really like answers and really like finding answers and finding really good reasons for these things. But I think the big thing is he just knows how to pitch, and there's something to be said for that. It's like, I love quantifying things. I think it's, I love reading, and trying to understand some of it because I'm not bright enough for it. But like, I love these kind of things and I love like them as theories and all that. But there's always going to be margins. Like, how do you measure a catcher? Like, all that's in the margins. And I think there's almost like is there a stuff minus? Did I already use that joke, or was I thinking that joke? I don't know. If there's like a stuff minus as like the difference between your stuff and your results, or something like that. I think Andrew Abbott's one of those guys because he locates well. He has good enough stuff, and he's also left-handed, and that's important as well. So yeah, I can't really solve any riddles for you, but I can tell you that old cliche that he just knows how to pitch, but he always has. That's what he was at UVA. He wasn't the guy coming out. You look at him and he comes off the bus and he looks more like the guys who are let into the clubhouse at 3:30 than the ones who inhabit that as usual. I mean, he'd fit in a press box. But it's just what he does well. And that's living on those margins.
I feel like we should introduce Trent to Lodom So we had this idea that popped up on the show a couple of years ago. We were talking about.
I don't care what she says.
It's it's Matthew Liberatore was the inspiration for this. He had reached the point where he was no longer a prospect people were excited about. He wasn't getting good results in the big leagues. No one liked him anymore. And I was at the point where I said, great, that's what I want. I want players that no one else likes because they're less expensive in fantasy baseball. They're less expensive in real baseball. Like it kind of goes into the weird is good. We call it Lodom because at the time our third host tried to spell model backwards on the fly and, flipped a few vowels. So we kept it because it makes a lot of sense. I think Andrew Abbott does embody this. And I do think the intangibles that you're referring to, the pitchability, sequencing, there's all these things guys can do that make them more effective. He probably does some or all of those things. And as a needs to know the answer sort of jerk, I have come back to one thing on multiple occasions that Abbott does well. Because he pitches in Great American Ballpark, people forget that it's a small outfield. Like, yeah, you give up homers, but it's less ground to cover. And Abbott gives up a lot of high catchable fly balls. So I think there's something in the batted ball types he generates. Some of that might be angle. It releases from a high angle. It might be the pitches and how they move. And it just doesn't quite get captured in our numbers. And he's going to have this run for a few years that probably is mid and high threes ERAs, despite 4 ERA projections. And we're all going to sit here and go, how's he doing it? And then by the time enough people believe in it, the stuff's going to deteriorate. And the home run rate's going to go up, and he's going to get pummeled, and he's going to pitch to those projections or worse after a few years of exceeding expectations. I think that's what's going to happen.
Throw global warming in there, and it's a disaster.
That is actually, I think,
I know.
Thing because
like half kidding, but not half kidding.
Because if you look at his monthly splits, I mean, you remember the story of last year, right? I feel like he is. When we talk about living on the margins, there's like a double-edged sword there. It's like it works, and it works for reasons that we may not be able to fully understand or explain, but you are on a margin, like you're living on a razor's edge. And I think that razor's edge for him is like he has a 57% fly ball rate. Like it is fly ball after fly ball after fly ball. And like I think that just the weather warms a little bit in August, he goes from having like a 1.5 homers per 9, which is already like, pretty high, but it works if he's not walking guys and giving up solo jobs to in August. It's you cover baseball in Cincinnati. August in Cincinnati is
I've been there.
Arm shredding territory. It's just it's where all the balls leave the ballpark, right? I mean, it's where we haven't seen Andrew Abbott make it through an August unscathed yet.
Yeah, and it is tough. And that's one of those things. I'm going to be really interested. I don't think we have enough data on this yet, but to see what kind of difference Jose Trevino makes with him in the game calling and that kind of things. Because, if you're looking at margins, that's one where maybe you haven't, you make the margin a little bit wider. If you have someone who, and not to say anything against any of the other catchers, but that's one thing that Trevino's known for is that game calling and the game planning. And that works great hand in hand with a guy like Andrew Abbott to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people focus on that trade and we're like, you gave up a really nice piece in Fernando Cruz, who, I think everybody in Cincinnati knew he was. It's not like they were surprised. They knew he's a good pitcher. I think it was more, Tyler Stevenson is a great offensive catcher. Like, it would be nice to have somebody who was a great defensive catcher to sort of pair with him. So it's an interesting idea.
Yeah. And like, they liked what they saw from him right away with Trevino, and he got signed to an extension in spring training. And I'll tell you what, that was an interesting thing. This is probably the wrong show for that, but like, at the Red Spring Training, they have kind of like a rooftop deck that overlooks the practice fields and whatever. And we've done a couple of those. I think when Eugenio Suarez got an extension, they had a little press conference up there. And we've had a couple things up there. And then when Trevino got his extension this spring, he was up there. And we watched, it was like 9 a.m. or whatever. We watched every player on the team come up and watch this. And then there was almost like a receiving line.
No way. This is for a guy who
player
just
came
got
and they
traded
shook
to
their
the
hands.
Reds.
Yeah. And he'd been there for a couple weeks, like maybe a month.
That's pretty impressive.
That's something, right?
Yeah, because I was
in that
like a Matt
position.
Chapman. Yeah, like I turned to a Matt Chapman presser who after a year people were saying, oh yeah, he's like the leader of the Giants clubhouse, but nobody came by or anything, it's like,
And like, Hunter Greene, there were a couple guys there for Hunter Greene. That was at the stadium here a couple years ago, early in the season. There might've been some with Gino as well. And Gino's one of the most liked people in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And had been there for a while, it overperformed, and he's a great guy and everybody loves Gino. But that's what really stuck out to me is that everybody was there.
That's amazing.
Every single player in that clubhouse was upstairs watching. And that says something to me.
Maybe he has a little bit something to do with our next question on the Cryon too. Hunter Greene, huh? I mean, he's catching him.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, and I'm working on this story as well. We've moved on to Hunter Greene? Because I can start rambling about Hunter Greene.
Yeah.
And actually, as one of the parts of the story, I was going to be like, this is a little sausage making where, like, I don't know something and I don't know how to find it out. Oh, I'll just ask Eno. And Eno is like one of the world's, like, DVR, you can back me on this. And I'm not just saying this because he's here, because usually I don't do that. But like, Eno's one of the great teammates of the world. Like,
Agreed.
Super glue guy. It doesn't matter. I'll be like, hey, I was kind of thinking this. And then it just sends Eno's like brain going. And Eno gets as excited as you do and sends you a bunch of stuff. And it's like, oh, great. So now it's there. And so basically, like the very little thing that I've noticed with Hunter Greene, this is very simplistic, is he's throwing more strikes. Mm-hmm. And throwing strikes is good. And so I talked to him about that. And I don't know if this is a cliche that's been said a lot of times or it just stuck in my head, and it's probably going to be a lead here soon, just because I enjoyed the wordplay. But what Hunter Greene said was, it takes balls to throw strikes in the big leagues.
Oh, that's ready-made. That's a title, right? Lead. That's a title, mate. Not even
right. And so it takes balls to throw strikes. And this is a guy in a very unique situation. Someone who was the number 2 pick in the draft, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when that was still a thing in high school, about the savior of baseball, who was a two-way player. And because he was a two-way player and because he had such a special arm, didn't pitch much in high school. And then he had, elbow issues and Tommy John in minors. I am willing to say, and Hunter backed me up on this, is almost like, yeah, of course. And I would think this is pretty rare, but I am guessing that he is at 25. There are very few 25-year-olds who have thrown more competitive pitches in the big leagues than everywhere else combined.
Mm-hmm.
And so we forget, like, not only is Hunter young, he was 17 when he was drafted. Not only is he young, but he's also inexperienced. And this is him becoming experienced. And, you could say, like, why, because young Hunter would kind of nibble some, right? And you look at these and you're like, hey, can't get out of the 5th. And that's nibbling. And this Hunter is like, yeah, this is my stuff, hit it.
Yeah.
Sarah says, I have really good stuff. Well, you try to hit it. And I think when you come up and you don't have much experience and all your experience is against the best players in the world, that's a very difficult thing. And even someone is confident and talented and smart as Hunter Greene, you have some instant feedback mentally, and you have to be able to prioritize or compartmentalize that. And so I think that's something that he's done, is he's become to that point where it's like he almost sees himself as everybody else does. We're like, this stuff is just amazing. Throw it in the zone. If they hit it, they hit it. And he's also improved his command. He's added that split finger, which he's throwing more and is more effective. The slider, I remember, seeing him pitch in Chattanooga a couple years ago when he opened there, and just texting with Kyle Bodie at the time, who was with the Reds at the time, and Kyle just saying, no, I think his slider is going to be his best pitch. And it's like, the other one's 103. That's pretty good. He goes, yeah, but that's slider. And then I watched a couple of them, and it's like, yeah, man, that's legit. And so really I don't know that the splitter has to be as good as it's gotten. But it's still that's a really good arsenal, those 3 pitches, and finding that third pitch that he can reliably throw either 4 strikes or that looks like a strike was also huge, because it's just that tiny little wrinkle in the back of your mind for the hitter. And when the ball's coming at you 103 or consistently 100, which we're seeing right now, any little thing in the back of your mind is working against you.
Yeah, I saw that excellent start out in San Francisco against Logan Webb, I believe it was, where they were matching zeros. And, he did lose a little bit of velo off the fastball because he was pitching. I think he pitched into the 9th or maybe the 8th.
It was the 9th. There was 2 outs in the 9th.
Yeah, he got all the way. Yeah, and he was more like 98. And so some of the hitters, some of the hitters, I think, began to sit.
Fuck. He's done.
Yeah, right. I think some of the hitters were like, well, screw that, I'm going to sit slider. And I think some of them were sitting slider and swung for the slider and got the splitter. So that was his game plan. It felt like was dominate with the fastball, slider second time through. As soon as they think they have something with the slider, splitter. And I think I focused ahead of the time being like, why is he throwing a splitter? Is he going to command that pitch? But now it's just like throw to the zone and let everything move off of that. So here's some fodder for your piece. Nobody in the big leagues has thrown as many pitches in the strike zone this year as Hunter Greene. And his whiff rate on those pitches is 3rd best.
Wow.
So, I mean, you could say that Logan Gilbert, Imanaga, they have percentage points more whiffs, but he has the most whiffs in the zone because he throws the most in the zone. And Gilbert and they're like, Shota is they're throwing more pitches outside the zone. They're dancing around a little bit more than him. He's just like, fill it up. This is my stuff. You can't hit it. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's right.
Yeah.
For the most part.
I wanted to ask you about Nick Lodolo. Where are the strikeouts? The results have been fine to these first few starts, but I kept looking at Nick Lodolo around all the injuries and thinking, hey, if it all comes together, he's a legit number 2, number 3 starter. The stuff's down a little bit. I think the velo on the fastball is down a tick so far, but what have you seen so far, and where are we going from here if Lodolo can stay healthy?
Yeah. I think, and and I kind of talked about this, the shape of that curveball, that his breaking ball is a little bit different. And I'm not sure. I haven't talked to Nick about this. He just came off paternity leave. But I was going to talk to Nick the other day, and I think a lot of it kind of goes back to the same thing we were talking about with Hunter. It's throwing strikes. That's what a lot of these guys just keep doing. And his breaking ball, I keep calling it a breaking ball because I did the story a couple of years ago. I forget which one he called it. He and his catchers called it a different pitch. One called it a curveball, one called it a slider.
Nice.
But
hopefully that's to lead to some shenanigans.
Yeah, but it's one of those where it's 2 or whatever, but they that pitch is on when you see him hitting guys in the back foot, right-handed hitters in the back foot. And I remember his rookie year, I went back and he led the league and hit batters. And I went to see how many, and I think it was something like 60% of them were back foot, hit the right-handed batter in the back foot. Because it is such a big, tailing, huge pitch that I think he's not using it quite as much, or he's shortened it and changed it a little bit in order to throw it more for strikes. Because a lot of times it was making this way across the zone, and you would see guys swing at balls that hit them on the back foot, which is crazy. But if they're able to hold up, it's always a ball, or called a ball. And so I think that's probably part of it, but that is just kind of off the top of my head what I've seen and kind of the things I've talked to, and I haven't talked to him specifically about that. But I mean, like, quite honestly, a Lodolo, we're talking the Cincinnati Reds, who play a great American ballpark, and we're talking about these pitchers, and then we're also thinking like, oh, you're going to add Rhett Lauder and Chase Burns. I mean, we saw what Rhett Lauder was able to do last year in a short period, and that's another guy who's a pitcher, and then Chase Burns is a guy who has stuff that, like, even Hunter Greene goes, that's great stuff, like, and so that's pretty interesting to me. And it's been the question on this team most of the offseason and continues to be is like, where does the offense come from? And I think there's some ways that they can get there. We haven't seen this whole team yet, and we haven't seen Tyler Stevenson. And Austin Hayes, since he's been back, has been good. So we shall see. But, like, I think they have enough, especially in this division, to be around for quite a bit. And that's the strength and depth of starting pitching. When you're talking about, your two highest paid players, I think, kind of off the top of my head, I know they're highest paid, and maybe they're second or third, are starting pitchers that we haven't talked about yet. And Brady Singer and Nick Martinez.
Yeah, well, the Nick Martinez situation,
like 5 other starters before that.
Those are going to be extra guys if everyone stays healthy the way they're built right now. And Martinez, the qualifying offer, I think he was right on that line where they probably knew there was a good chance he was going to accept it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have offered it.
I think it was one of those for them that they were like, either way, they're cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things where, like, okay, we're going to spend this money and we'll spend it somehow. If Nick Martinez does it, we have a guy that we know can pitch in multiple different roles and is willing to. And they also know him well enough that, like, you can, a year before, you can talk to everybody and he could say, yeah, I'm willing to go to the bullpen or start. I'd rather start, but I'm happy I'll be fine if I go to the bullpen if that's where teams need me. People can say that. But he actually went through a season where he did that, and at no point was he a malcontent about it. Like, he didn't, he was the same guy. And I think as much of the $21 million, the qualifying offer they gave him, it was certainly deserved and paid for what's on the mound, but it's the stuff off the mound that also helps. And especially with a young rotation, young pitchers, they brought in Singer, who's more veteran, but this is building around Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, Hunter Greene, Rhett Lauder, Chase Burns. And they had a year with Nick Martinez to know exactly how he meshed with those guys, and those guys all adored him. Those guys, I remember vividly, it was the last Friday of the season. We're in Chicago. Martinez threw a complete game, lost 1-0 to the Cubs. And afterwards, I just like talking to some people, and then I was like, it was Lodolo and Abbott, and they're standing next to each other. And it's like, hey, can I ask you guys just a second about Nick? And they're like, oh yeah, like he's the guy you watch. Like, I want to be like Nick Martinez. Like, I watch him every day, what he does. That's all I do is follow what he does. He is the most prepared. He's the best. Yeah. And like the fact that the guy can do that, show that he's not a jerk about it, and everybody recognizes it. That was the same one where he'd bought all the rookies suits, and they got delivered in Chicago. I think it was a couple of veterans, but he was among them. I mean, that's stuff that's important. And they knew from having him for 1 year that if they brought him back, if he came back, there is positives all around.
He's fascinating. I believe he's the only major league pitcher to have thrown in the major leagues with a pulse on his arm. So he's super dialed into tracking his fatigue and his throws and everything. So, if they're like glomming on to him, like there's a possibility he's helping kind of expand health outcomes for the young pitchers, because that's what the thing that he's most fascinated by, other than the pitch design that got him that Vulcan change and got him back to the major leagues. That was important for him, but the other thing that's most important for him is understanding how his body reacts to workload, and how he can be a reliever and a starter at the same time, how he can kind of go in seamlessly in between those, because really the big thing is, how do you respond to like how much rest do you need, and like how does your body respond? And so he's really on top of that in terms of tracking his health. He works with Casey Mulholland at Connect Pro, who's also just all about that. Pitching requires building up and rest, and you have to really science that up. And that was the thing that Bodie wanted to do too in Cincinnati, was really track everybody's throws and dial that in. So if they're listening to him that way, that could be good for their health outcomes. Just wanted to mention also Lodolo up in zone rate, so he's also throwing more strikes, and maybe he doesn't have quite the dominant stuff as Hunter Greene, so that might lead to some balls in play, but maybe they're balls in play that he wants.
Right. And he's had that issue too, of not being able to go deep.
Yeah.
And strikeouts are great and they're important. But easy outs are awesome. 9 pitch innings, 6 pitch innings, 10 pitch innings are important. And who cares if what the exact stat sheet looks like, as long as it's 0.
Yeah, well, as exciting I think as the
our fantasy guys do, but I guess sorry,
but
sorry, I went into real baseball for a second.
No, we are seamlessly both.
I know you guys. Yeah. I'm not saying.
But it's exciting as the starting.
I just don't think about it because I don't play anymore.
Here comes the whammy sound.
Yeah,
the bullpen. What is going on in the bullpen? Like, is there, as the cry on ass, is there anybody who's gonna be the closer this year? I kind of like Ashcraft to be the closer, but
I don't know if he gets there this year, but I think I could see him having a 20 save season at some point, maybe next year. I think Alexis Diaz has been confounding a little bit. He hurt his hamstring, and that has really hurt. He's not the most consistent guy with his mechanics anyway, and it threw them all out of whack. And
that's where all the walks are coming from, you think?
And that's where the walks are coming from. I watched him, I know I was in spring, right before they decided that he was going to start on the IL. I was on the backfields watching, and then I was talking to somebody afterwards, one of their pitching people, and they're like, "Well, what you see?" And I was like, "It looked like he was just off. There was 3 or 4 calls that were balls or strikes that could have gone either way, and he was just on the wrong side of them because he wasn't consistent." And then, I talked to him, and he talked about how his landing foot wasn't strong. He would land and that ankle would kind of move a little bit. Whereas he goes what I'm working on is just sticking it and keeping it straight, so that, again, kinetic chain, everything stays in line. And I think that has been the biggest issue. And people said, the ball tracking, the flight and what it's doing at those times, that was all okay. It was just the location being off just a little bit and being inconsistent. And so because he wasn't landing quite right, sometimes it would be a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And it was difficult to find just that consistency. And that's what they really
And the landing leg is the hamstring he hurt?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually, I read a recent analysis that suggests that one's the rougher one, because the pushing off is not as important as
right, because
landing is.
Yeah, it's stability, right?
Yeah,
it's the power is going to be there. You don't need to be as precise with power.
Yeah,
power is not for precision. That the back leg, the push off leg is for power. The front leg is precision.
Yeah, I agree with you. So you think it's Pagan for now, or do you think it's heading towards Santillan?
I think if Diaz has a couple more good outings, he'll get a shot.
Okay.
And that's a big part of that is that, again, we're talking about personalities, is the type of person Emilio Pagan is. His ego is not getting in the way there.
Okay.
You know, again, like I know I say this, like Pagan and Nick Martinez are cut from a similar cloth that way with the way they deal with everybody.
And then numerically, like Pagan has a home run issue, and that can that can come and bite you at any time.
Especially in this ballpark, especially as it warms up.
Yeah, maybe getting out in front of that.
And so, like, it's good to, like, hey, if Emilio's going to be your closer for a little bit, make sure it's in April.
Yeah, right.
Be glue early in the season and then move back and get to the 6th, 7th inning role that we're used to seeing Pagan in the rest of the way.
And he is a guy that is, you know, hey, it can only help that he has had this good start, or relatively good start, and help later in the year. But the bullpen, I'm excited about Ashcraft. And you know who else is excited about Ashcraft? And again, this is part of the other part, is Graham Ashcraft. He loves the role. And I think he, you know, it was one of those things where he was always kind of a default starter. The idea all along was, we really think this is a back of the bullpen guy, but then he just started out so well. He got in a spot start in Toronto a couple years back, and then he just kept pitching well enough and better than what the other options. And so I think this is kind of going to what they thought he was going to be all along. And that's a guy who maybe you use him a bit like TJ Antone was used a little bit. Hopefully not with the same injury problems, but where there was a point where TJ Antone was just a high leverage reliever. And whether that was the 9th or the 6th or the 7th. And I think Graham Ashcraft is a guy you could see that with.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they put the pieces together, because I think until they sort the roles out, that's going to be the biggest weakness.
And here's one other thing. When you talk about sorting out roles and you talk about managers who are very good at that, the guy they have now is very good at that. And he has quite the track record with guys knowing their roles and him believing that it is very important that guys know their roles.
Yeah, it's a huge change. Just seeing what Tito ends up doing over the course of this year and beyond, I think, is going to be pretty important for the Reds in determining whether or not they get back to the postseason and actually make some noise in October at some point with the core that they have in place. Trent, we appreciate your time and your insight. We know you got to run, so we'll let you go here, but we'll catch up with you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And whatever Mark said, don't believe him. You guys are doing great.
We appreciate that. It's the nicest thing anyone said about us all year.
Thanks, Trent.
So tall bar, I'm sure. All right. Have a good one, guys.
The NFL draft is almost here, and the Athletic Podcasting Network has you covered on Wednesday. That's tomorrow, April 23rd. Diana Rossini will share all the info she's hearing the day before the draft live on Scoop City's YouTube channel. That's going to be at 4 Eastern. Then on Thursday, the Athletic Football Show kicks off a 2-night live event. On night 1, Robert Mays, Derek Clausen, Dane Brugler, and Bruce Feldman break down all 32 first-round picks in real time. On night 2, Robert, Derek, and Dane return to cover all the picks from rounds 2 and 3. You can watch the Athletic Football Show's 2025 live NFL draft special on their YouTube page beginning at 7 Eastern on Thursday, April 24th, and 6:30 Eastern on Friday, April 25th. Highly recommend it. It is very informed coverage of the NFL draft and a much more pleasant listening and viewing experience than the mainstream coverage, which is just loud and in your face. If you like loud and in your face, okay, then maybe that's for you. But check out our stuff. It's really, really good. Let's get to some baseball news you should know. Nick Kurtz on his way to the big leagues, promoted by the A's, will be joining the club on Wednesday. I have seen a lot of AAA data on Nick Kurtz pop up on my timeline on Blue Sky in the last couple of weeks, and it makes sense. He's doing all the things we want power hitters to do in the minor leagues highest level. He's popped 7 homers already. It's a 321, 385, 655 start at the plate. 26 Ks and 97 plate appearances. So I would imagine that as Nick Kurtz gets his first exposure to big league pitching, there might be a little bit of swing and miss there as he makes adjustments. But this is a quick path to the big leagues for a guy that went 4th overall in the draft last year. Less than a calendar year after being drafted, Nick Kurtz is going to be a big leaguer. How quickly do you think he's going to make the adjustments? And, we talked a lot about Chandler Simpson and the unique profile he brings and just trying to find the fit on the roster. Like, is Nick Kurtz actually up for good? And did they just find a way to, between first base, DH, then having Rooker play more in the outfield? Can we see Kurtz, Soderstrom, and Rooker as a regular trio in the heart of this Athletics lineup?
Yeah, I don't think you call up somebody with this much pedigree, this much interest, a top 25 prospect who was your first round pick and has torn through the minor leagues like this. I don't think you call him up to play for, intermittently for 7 days and send him back down. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that this is one of those times where the corresponding move is almost a little irrelevant, like I know that I really harp on that, but when it's a top 10 prospect, they could just play their way into it. They're treated differently. They're given more chances. This isn't calling up, a 150th ranked prospect because your second baseman, has a sore hammy, this is a little different. And so I've been trying to figure out how it's going to work. And I thought that I'd heard that Nick Kurtz was going to play in the outfield, but I'm looking at Baseball Reference and Fangraphs and seeing no record of Nick Kurtz playing in the outfield since one game in the fall league and otherwise college. And so I don't think he's going to start playing in the outfield in the big leagues. Brent Rooker, on the other hand, has played in the outfield a fair amount, 46 times in 2021 when he came up in Minnesota, 60 times in 2023, and 3 times this year. So I believe, and I'm excited for this in a couple places, that Brent Rooker is going to get outfield eligibility. I mean, the way this works is that Nick Kurtz has to outplay Miguel Andujar, who has been fine, but is a 30-year-old right-hander with no power. So to some extent, that is a low bar to cross. You could play some games where Soderstrom catches some, and you get Kurtz and Rooker in at DH and first, and that gets Andujar some playing time. Maybe Andujar plays against lefties for Lawrence Butler and plays when Soderstrom catches. Boom. That's enough to keep him on the roster, keep him playing regularly, keep some value for the major league team while giving Nick Kurtz all of the runway he needs.
Yeah, I guess there's a few ways they can do it. Soderstrom behind the plate would be fun in the sense that it adds eligibility to a player that's mashing. I'm less sure they're going to do that. I think Rooker in the outfield more has been in the works for the last 10 days or so. I think of the 3 times he started a game in the outfield, all of them have happened since April 12th. So it's almost like they were letting him show that his arm was recovered from surgery. Rooker joined us in the offseason, mentioned he had that procedure, and wanted to give him a couple games out there, make sure everything was all good. And now they're going to go ahead and flip that switch. Maybe that's the most frequent adjustment, but you're right. The option of using Soderstrom behind the plate, maybe if Shea Langoliers is hurt at some point, that's one way they can move things around, take some of the pressure off of Rooker's defense and play some of the other depth guys on the roster. But as they pointed out in our Discord, listeners were quick to acknowledge this. The A's are an easy, rule of 5 team. Like when you look at their core, like they have quickly positioned themselves as a good lineup that has an identity, has a core that is going to be out there most days and actually can do some damage. Like it's a good group of bats when you look at Butler, Rooker, Soderstrom, Langoliers. Even if you don't count him in the 5, like as the catcher, he could be a 6th guy that's out there all the time. Wilson is an everyday guy at shortstop, even though he's not necessarily a power hitter. Like he's going to be a productive offensive player. And then, JJ Bleday is probably part of that core group as well. So it's gone a lot better than I would have expected. If we had a conversation about where the Athletics were headed this time last year, I was way less optimistic about their bats than what they've proven to put together. And a year ago, Nick Kurtz wasn't in the organization yet. We didn't know who that fourth pick was going to be. We didn't know if Jacob Wilson was going to hit enough to be a viable major leaguer. Lawrence Butler hadn't had his breakout yet, right? Like a lot of things have changed for them in the past calendar year.
Yeah, I think there's two things that the A's do really well. I think that their major league hitting coach is a good one. And they recognize this maybe just is three things, but they recognize that they've said it publicly that a lot of player development happens at the major league level. You can only get the player close enough to the major leagues. They still have to make that last hurdle in the major leagues. And the third thing they do well is that solution to doing well in the major leagues and making that last hurdle is to give them time. And I can't point to anything other than maybe the easiest thing to point to is J.J. Bleday's 2023 and 2022 seasons. He comes in, 2022 is Miami. He'd been terrible in Miami. They're just dumping him. He comes to Oakland and he performs mediocrely. I mean, a 91 WRC plus with poor defense, a 195 average, 310 OBP, a hole at the top of the zone, 0.4 WAR. There are lots of teams that would say, okay, thank you. And the Oakland, because they do these mini rebuilds and they're not trying to fit a ton of prospects in at the same time all the time, because that's the one thing that can happen with the Orioles, right? It's like, where do you play Connor Normie? You know what the A's would never have to, not Normie or Mayo, right? The one thing the A's would never have to debate, do we have place for these guys?
Yeah.
They'd just be like, no, we have to be good again in 3 or 4 years. Yes, you're up, you're playing. And so Bleday got another shot and he is now a viable everyday player for them. And so I think Lawrence Butler struggled when he first came up, but he knew he would have runway. So Rooker bounces around. He finally gets a long look from some team and looks how good he is. So this is a broken record at this point. We've talked about this enough, but I think that also says something about what's going to happen with Kurtz, right? They don't really call guys up to play a little bit.
Right. He's going to play. If he struggles, he'll go down. And when he's ready, he'll come back up. That's been their pattern, which is a much easier pattern to deal with than what some other organizations do when they're a little more quick to make those adjustments, or they're competing and trying to thread the needle perfectly with player development and winning right at present.
Yeah, I'd almost say that Kurtz could struggle and still stay up.
Maybe. Yeah, it depends on the magnitude of the struggles, right? If he's taking good plate appearances overall, strikeout rate's manageable, then yeah, you probably let him work through it. By raw projections, I just ran the auction calculator again to think about Kurtz from a fantasy perspective, because we had that mailbag question on Monday's show asking about a lot of the pop-up first baseman or the younger guys that were playing well, Aranda, Torkelson. Soderstrom obviously was kind of the cut above the rest, the guy that we really liked in that group. But Nick Kurtz is going to be the next wave of questions. Like, he's obviously going to be a popular pickup in weekly leagues. He's going to be picked up immediately in a lot of first come, first serve leagues. Do you see enough ceiling and enough short-term playing time to pick up Nick Kurtz in 12-team leagues or even in 10-team mixed leagues? Does he hold up well enough to take a spot from some of the veterans we talked about yesterday? Or is he more of a speculative ad where you pick him up, maybe you don't play him right away in those shallow formats because you want to get a look at how quickly he can adjust? Well,
his swing and strike rate almost doubled, from A ball to AAA. So I'm a little worried that he will actually swing and miss some. And if he swings and miss some, he may have, some of the projections 222 average, some 240. And I think that might hurt him a little bit in the 10-team league situation, but there's also the chance that some of that's ABS related and that he has a good eye and that it was just a struggle to figure out, what he should do against the automatic balls and strikes that they're using down there. And there's some chance that he just comes up and he's hot again like he was when he first hit AA and hit 308. I know there's only 15 plate appearances, but he hit 321 even with that 27% strikeout rate in AAA. So yes, the short answer is yes. He's worth a pickup in every league. I just, in this 10-team league, like who who are you dropping?
That's
what I hate about 10-team leagues. It's like you're dropping someone good.
Are you letting Nathaniel Lowe go as your corner in a 10-teamer to make that space? Ryan Mountcastle. I mean, it's probably guys that were one of your last picks that are just good enough because they play every day, but maybe don't have the ceiling you're looking for.
I guess I could do it. I mean, it's crazy that Nate Lowe is hitting 300 right now, but Mountcastle.
Nate Lowe's doing exactly what you would expect Nate Lowe to do in a good Nate Lowe year.
Yeah. I think I could drop both of them, though. You know, they're both like 260, 15 home run hitters the rest of the way, which seems like you drop one and you can find one later if you need to.
Right, because the possibility with Kurtz is if he does click right away,
280, 20 homer hitter the rest of the way or whatever.
A little more average, 25. A little more power. Like that. Door number 2 in this case actually is more interesting, but we're excited to see what that debut brings for Nick Kurtz. A couple other debuts. Craig Yoho, a favorite from our Discord, got to the big leagues. He's promoted by the Brewers, and he debuted Monday night against the Giants. Yoho is a little strange. The pitch movement is strange because the changeup is very similar to the Devin Williams airbender. As we previously talked about, the velocity, the fastball velocity is not the premium top shelf typical closer fastball velocity, but there's a world in which Craig Yoho eventually gets saves. I just don't think it's anytime soon. I think it's more of he's part of the high leverage bridge to the 9th inning rather than their solution for the 9th inning at some point in 2025.
I wouldn't be surprised if his Stuff Plus goes up tomorrow. Remember that the first day the arm angle is imputed. It is guessed by a mini model that we have. And I could see his arm angle and that sort of mini airbender that he throws. It was misclassified while we were watching as a curveball. And I think that is a little sign that it'll do well once arm angle is put in. You know what I mean? Like if the machines are like curveball and you're like, no, that's the little mini airbender, dude. That's no curveball. I think, if you can fool the machines, there's something good going on there. So I would expect his Stuff Plus to go up. Also, another piece of evidence I have that is that his Stuff Plus in AAA was good. We have discovered that our Stuff Plus in AAA right now is relative to AAA. And so it is overshooting the mark. You have to subtract like 15 points of Stuff Plus to make it relative to the big leagues. We're fixing that. It's one of those years. We have a new model. It's like when you get a new model car and it's like all the little things are here and there. We got to figure it out. But in any case, I think Yoho does have the stuff possibly to close later. I do think Abner Uribe is first in line.
I think so too. He's off to a good start. If they need a replacement for McGill, just being a little closer to the 9th inning already, being on the opening day roster, I think all of those things sort of matter in the shorter term decision making. But excited to see Yoho in a bullpen that seems to need a few fresh arms in it. Yoel Payamps looks like he might be trending into DFA territory. Every bullpen's got a guy like that right now, and unfortunately it looks like that might be Payamps in Milwaukee. Also noticed a couple things, the corresponding moves here. Nestor Cortez on the 60-day IL. He had that PRP injection a couple of weeks ago now, but that gives you an idea. The best case scenario for him is a second half return at this point. Even that's not necessarily guaranteed. The corresponding move to get Yoho on the active roster was optioning Logan Henderson back down to AAA. That was done in part because Tobias Myers comes back this week. Myers will return to the Brewers rotation on Thursday, so there wasn't a spot for Henderson anyway. But I did want to ask you what you thought of Logan Henderson's debut on Sunday. That came against the A's back in Milwaukee. By the raw numbers, 9 Ks over 6 innings. It's about as much as you could ask for. Got the win. Just a really good all-around outing. But he did it with a pretty unusual, mostly fastball, changeup mix. Like Logan Henderson's been strange, like as a prospect, but the results have been there. So I'm just curious what you think of the first big league look we got at Henderson.
I don't normally sort of prefer changeup first guys, and he's obviously one of them. It's kind of amazing in that start. He used 2 curves and 3 cutters. So 45 four-seamers, 33 changeups, 2 curves, and 3 cutters. That seems unsustainable to me. But it also suggests that he is comfortable throwing changeups right on right, that it's a good enough changeup to do so. He had eye-popping strikeout rates in the minor leagues. I just think that there's going to be some struggle at some point where he has reverse splits and is trying to figure out, a better way to get righties out, because I do think right on right changeups can work, but you are aiming for a little part of the inside corner where it's easy to throw balls or have it leak over the middle of the plate where people can hit it. That's why right on right changeups are usually avoided. But if he shows exceptional command and stays out of the happy zone, worst case scenario is more walks are coming. And that's what he saw in AAA. Any case, I just hesitate to put my full stamp of approval on him because it is a fastball changeup. Like, who else do you know is great at fastball changeup and doesn't really throw anything else? Yeah, it's like what Chris Paddock came up as. It's like, it's.
I think the difference though, I think the game plan in this case, and we see this sometimes in debuts, and the game plan was simplified by design. Because if you look at what Logan Henderson was throwing at AAA, the cutter and the slider got more usage at AAA to begin the season. Almost 10% slider usage, 13% cutter usage, right? That to me is a little more viable than almost entirely four-seam changeup, right? Like getting those other 2 pitches in, even 20% of the time combined, will give him more options and maybe make him less likely to have a same-handed split problem like you talked about.
Yeah, in AAA, the slider was rated below average by the Stuff Plus that is relative to AAA. So
that might be why they didn't use it.
Yeah, right. So I mean,
debut.
Who am I missing? Who are even great starting pitchers who started this way, who started out this way, who at their core have a great changeup and Michael Wacha.
Yeah, and it took Wacha a while to be consistent good Michael Wacha, so I could understand where your hesitation comes from there.
I'm doing starters by pitch type value. Jameson Taillon's kick change is number 1. That's per 100 thrown. Let's just do regular pitch type value. Nick Lodolo, number 1. Andrew Haney, Michael King. But I would say he's a sweeper first guy. Skubal. Skubal, all right. Skubal. Christopher Sanchez.
Christopher Sanchez was the one I started thinking about. Like, yeah, that's kind of similar.
Christopher Sanchez. They don't really throw similar.
No.
But, okay. Yeah, and then Michael Wacha's still on there. Freddie Peralta's on here. I guess he's kind of always had a good changeup and has kind of fiddled with the breaking balls a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, fastball Freddie at the beginning was like, was he 80% fastballs? I mean, it was.
I don't think Logan has his fastball though. So
no, I don't think so either.
Pepio.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that I don't think he's as good as his debut made him look.
That was a great debut. So yeah, hard to follow that up and maintain that sort of level. But I'm sure we'll see more of Logan Henderson at some point later on this year. And hopefully we'll see a few more sliders and cutters once that happens. I did see a note that Brandon Young is back in the mix for the Orioles. They put, I think it was Cody Petit on the IL.
After that 24-run game?
Yeah, after the Sunday meltdown for that Orioles staff. And they may need to use Young as a starter again this weekend. But I just wanted to ask the same kind of question we asked about Henderson. What did you see from Brandon Young in his debut last week? And could he end up being at least partial answer to some of the Orioles pitching woes?
Yeah, he's a little bit more easily read because there's a prototype here. He's got good secondaries and not great fastballs. The nice thing is in today's age, of course, he has multiple fastballs. And so his job is to learn from what Cade Povich has gone through, and what other young pitchers have gone through when they find out that their fastball that was good enough for the minor leagues is not necessarily good enough for the major leagues, and that they really have to mix it up as much as possible. I don't think he has elite upside, but it is nice that he came in and threw basically every pitch 25% of the time, which is, he's already learned it, because in AAA, he was 42% fastballs. He comes up to big leagues, he's 30% fastballs. And he's basically, throwing everything a quarter of the time. The curve and the change are good major league pitches. The fastballs are mediocre. I think he'll be fine. I think he's a matchup streamer.
Matchup streamers play, especially in deeper leagues. So there's your takeaway. So do you like Logan Henderson a little more than Brandon?
Yes, because there could be, like maybe he learns from Tobias Myers to just throw the fastball as hard as possible. Him and Tobias Myers should be talking to each other. Tobias Myers is another fastball changeup guy who's trying to, make it a bigger arsenal beyond that.
Yeah. So there you go. Gives you an idea of some of the newer pitchers we've seen and what to think as they try and carve out roles here in the near future. One other note that I saw as we get ready to go out the door, Spencer Strider back to the IL with a hamstring strain, suffered while playing catch. I mean, I think the silver lining here is that it's a hamstring strain. His legs, by the way, looked a lot stronger. I don't know if anyone really noticed it other than a few people in Blue Sky, but as you like to say,
huge
hams.
Hams. It's absolute hams. Also, Max Meyer, just looking great. Just absolutely. He had the second fewest pitches for 14 strikeouts in the game. The Cincinnati offense is hit or miss, and maybe they got tired scoring 24 runs the day before. But Myers absolutely, everything that his draft position suggests. Interesting debut also for Caleb Durbin, hitting a ball at the top of the zone out in San Francisco. Between him and Turang, maybe if they hit 20 homers, 25 homers together, then maybe that'll be everything they need.
Yeah, well, we were watching that game last night, and it was the Brewers-Giants game last night, and the defense, initially early in that start for Quinn Priester, he was getting phenomenal defensive work. I mean, Jackson Chourio had a diving catch in right field in the second inning.
40%
loaded
catch probability, yeah.
If he missed that, everyone scores, and Quinn Priester gets gombered, or we get gombered, and Quinn Priester has a completely different line. As that game went on, so I was watching the Brewers feed. I imagine you were watching the Giants booth because it's a good booth, and the Brewers booth's good too. I just didn't have the choice to toggle back and forth. But the Brewers booth was talking a lot about San Francisco as the sun goes down and how wet the grass gets there because of the marine layer. And I don't know if I've just ignored Giants booth talking about that in the past, or if they just don't talk about it because it's the home park and it's like that all the time. But is that something you see? Whereas the middle innings begin at night games, the grip the infielders are getting trying to field balls starts to get worse. You could see it for a good infield defense. The Brewers were uncharacteristically struggling to make pretty routine plays.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out there was a Durbin play where was it the spin on the ball or was it the wet grass or what was it? I haven't necessarily heard that before, but I do know living here that there are just times where it's just wet. It's a little bit like a Seattle wetness where it's it's just wet. It's just 100% humid. You're just walking through water. There's just water everywhere. It's it's not raining, but there's water everywhere. That's a common feeling in the Bay Area. So I could see that. I'm going up to the city today and probably tomorrow. So I will see if I can catch a Giants infielder and ask him about that. I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, because the implication was that the Brewers had a few guys, including Durbin, who'd never played on that field before, and that it was a little more problematic for guys.
And is Durbin, how out of position is Durbin at third? I mean, was he more of a second baseman with the Yankees? I feel I
thought he played a lot of both. I'm going to check it just because I should know. This is a thing I should know. Caleb Durbin has played twice as many professional innings at second base than he has at third. He's played 767 innings defensively at third base in the minors, 1490 at second. So, more comfortable at second, but not.
They don't have a throwing speed up yet for him. So I don't know what his arm is like, Durbin, but Turangs is not good, I guess.
Well, he's hurt right now too. Like he's playing. Like they were going to play him at short this spring, and they decided to move him back over to second in part because of his arm. So it's a little bit of that.
It's
with Durbin,
31st percentile this year. Oh, but he was 23rd percentile last year, so he doesn't have a third baseman's arm necessarily.
So why are we talking about Caleb Durbin's arm? Because I think Caleb Durbin's defense matters a lot for his playing time. So if you picked him up this weekend or you're thinking about picking him up, he needs to be a good defender. And there was one play that he stole a hit from Willy Adames, had to make a tough throw, and had plenty of arm. So again, judging it on a very, very small
and
sample.
I think the one that we thought that he might have miffed or whatever, in real time it looked like he miffed it, but when we talked about it, there was weird spin and maybe it was wet. So
yeah, looked like it got cute a little bit.
Mostly good grades for his debut. So
yeah,
I think I don't know that he's like 10 teams.
I don't know if you're getting down to tens, but I do think at least in this 14, 15 team leagues. Yeah, I think he'll play there, and he's got 90th percentile sprint speed, so that bodes well as you're trying to
go Brewers. Here they go.
It's fun. It's fun to watch. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can find us on Blue Sky, enosaris.bsky.social. I think you're verified now, so I got to get on that
very
train.
Fancy. I'm verified on Instagram where I have 1,000 followers or something. So
about 1,000 more followers than I have.
Yeah.
I don't do much over there. DVR.bsky.social if you want to give me a follow there as well. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. Thanks again to Trent Rosecrans for joining us to talk Reds. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.